Okay, depending on your age, you might know the Morris Garages or MG brand for one of two things. Firstly, it is a resurgent Chinese-owned British brand that now develops and offers very interesting alternatives at affordable prices. Or secondly, a legacy British brand renowned for lightweight sports cars that are also stylish. Clearly, the new MG Cyberster is an attempt to merge both those images together, and in this video, I'm going to find out if MG have actually succeeded in doing that, and critically, if the Cyberster actually also succeeds at being a worthy halo sports car. My name is Tariq Azmi and this is Caricarz.com. Okay, the first and most obvious thing I want to talk about the MG Cyberster is the fact that it has very sporty looks and styling. I mean, certainly it's low and wide, but it also has enough sharp edges and curves all around to make it pretty enough for most. I will agree, some will find the styling a little bit loud, but there are some very interesting pieces all around, which I'm going to show you in a bit. But obviously for many, what's very interesting with the MG Cyberster's front fascia are its full LED headlights. I think they feature a very distinct and unmistakable design, more so when you study it closely and look at the internal motif of the graphics and how they illuminate. This is quite interesting if you ask me. So moving to the side profile of the MG Cyberster, as you can see, it's quite interesting, very stylish with the long front, short rear, traditional sports car proportions, but it's also quite interesting in the details whereby, in the case of this dual motor all-wheel drive variant, you'll notice it rolls on two-tone 20-inch alloy wheels, and hiding behind them are a set of decently sized brake rotors with red painted brake calipers. Now, down further in the midsection, you will also notice that MG have added some very interesting contrasting gloss black aerodynamic bits, but with the side profile, clearly the most interesting part about the Cyberster are its scissor doors, which are powered, which means you also get the novelty of remote powered door opening. Okay, last but not least, when it comes to the exterior design and styling of the MG Cyberster, I saved perhaps the best for last, and obviously it's not the doors, we've covered that earlier. It is the open top thrills provided by this Roadster, and obviously the design looks great and it harks back to the Cyberster's predecessors like the MG ANA and the MGB from the 60s and 70s. It delivers that magic wind in hair thrills, and for your information, this retractable soft top mechanism takes about 15 seconds to retract or deploy. It can also do that on the move up to speeds of 50 kilometers an hour. So just to finish off the discussion about the MG Cyberster's exterior design, you really either love it or hate it. So let me know what you think of it in the comments below. And now we move into the cabin of the MG Cyberster, and there are two big takeaways here. Firstly, look at the design. It is very driver focused and for obvious reasons. Secondly, behind the driver focusedness, you will also notice that the MG Cyberster is fully loaded with plenty of tech and amenities. Now, before we dive deep into the tech and features, let me talk about the cabin in general. Despite the Cyberster's low and somewhat compact nature, it's actually quite spacious. There's enough space here for two people, hence why it's a strict two-seater. And it's quite luxurious if you ask me, because MG have used a rich amount of leather and suede upholstery in the dash and the seats to make it feel quite luxurious, and there's even some very nice visual touches like what appears to be forged carbon in this center console trim. Otherwise, it's very nice, very sporty, very high-tech, and that high-techness is exuded by the amount of screens you have here. I mean, altogether there are 4 of which, each serving a dedicated purpose. Okay, of the 4 screens present, 3 of them are actually touch screens where you can operate dedicated functions like down here in the center stack. This screen operates mostly the climate control and a few other things like the audio volume and some of the vehicle settings. Now, over here on the left side, this touch screen serves as the primary infotainment screen, and this is where your wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto display is shown, whereas the touchscreen on the right shows a few other functions including weather display, and this is also where the 360-degree and parking camera displays are. Obviously, the biggest screen here is the center digital instrument panel, and this is not a touchscreen, but the display is actually quite nice, quite sporty, and quite rich if you ask me. My only complaint with these four screens is that the interface is not very user friendly. You definitely need to study them quite a bit when you first get to know the car, to know where is what function is where. And annoyingly, this is something that I find quite basic, but it could have been handled easily. I think MG should have added a shroud or a hood of some sort over this main screen cluster to prevent some glare, because sometimes when I'm driving this car, especially with the top down, there's a bit of glare and it's sometimes a bit hard to grasp things on the display. But otherwise, it's not much to complain. All these displays work and they offer quite a lot of function too. And before I forget, this drop top also comes brimmed with a very nice sounding Bose surround audio system, so you could blast your tunes with this pretty well. Okay, at this point I'm sure many of you are already wondering why the MG Cyberster has powered scissor doors. Well, the answer is practicality and necessity. Firstly, the Cyberster is actually quite a wide car. In fact, it is wider than most normal cars. That means normal door opening just won't cut it. You won't be able to access the cabin through traditional door openings unless you put the doors this way. Now, this way, the entry and access into the cabin is made easier, more so with the roof open. To control the doors, there are dedicated buttons in the center console. Plus, when you are out of the car and you want to close the doors, you also have dedicated buttons to close them. But that's not all. Now, besides the remote door opening using the key fob I showed you earlier, to open the doors from the outside, just remember with the Cyberster, the button to open the doors are right here at the top of this ledge. And to avoid any dings and mishaps, MG have even equipped specially positioned sensors to make sure that the doors, when they open, they don't hit anything or anybody, and it stops automatically should it detect an obstruction. Let me show you. Ha! That's pretty neat if you ask me. And I want to wrap up on the kit and features list for the MG Cyberster by highlighting one interesting novelty and one very important addition. Starting with the former, there's an artificial engine sound suite available, and you get to choose between two engine soundtrack choices. They're quite interesting, so here's how they sound. Just like any other premium or luxurious EV offering coming out of China today, the MG Cyberster is also fully loaded with high degree of semi-autonomous driving abilities thanks to the MG Pilot ADAS suite that's equipped as standard. And the interesting talking points continue with the Cyberster's rear fascia, where you will find sporty sharp touches like this rear diffuser element finishing gloss black with a hint of red. But clearly, like what you saw in the front fascia, the Cyberster's rear fascia's real talking point are its full LED taillights. I mean, just look at it. It not only has the typical trendy touches like a full width LED light bar. On each side, you will notice that the taillights are designed directionally and even features directional turn signals. Clearly, when you're tailing this car, you won't mistake it for anything else. And now we move on to the next most interesting part about the MG Cyberster, and that's the fact that it delivers near supercar-like speeds. In fact, it will do 0 to 100 km/h in just 3.2 seconds. So that supercar-like speed specifically comes from this dual-motor all-wheel drive variant of the MG Cyberster. It features one electric motor over each axle, and the headlining figures are very, very high, 544 PS and 725 Newton meters of torque. On top of the very, very fast and rapid acceleration I showed you earlier, this variant of the Cyberster also has a rather high electronically capped Vmax of 201 km/h. That's pretty high for an EV if you ask me. If this sounds too much for you, don't worry, there's a lower powered rear-wheel drive single motor version of the Cyberster also available, but even that one will do 0 to 100 km/h in sports car-like times of 5 seconds. Now, regardless of variant, the Cyberster uses a 77 kWh battery pack underneath, and it features the ability to draw in both AC and DC charging. The latter goes up to 150 kilowatts, the former is a bit on the low side at 7 kilowatts. So with the charging inputs I mentioned earlier, charging times are quite predictable. At 7 kilowatt AC, 0 to 100% takes about 10.5 hours according to MG Motor Malaysia. But if you find a DC fast charger that dispenses up to 150 kilowatts, 10 to 80% takes just 38 minutes, I was informed, so that's not too bad. Now, let's move on to range, and this is quite important because this sports car, although it's fully electric, does offer relatively decent range. In fact, in this dual motor all-wheel drive variant, a full charge grants up to 446 km. Obviously, if you want to go longer and further, you will need to opt for the slightly slower but definitely cheaper rear-wheel drive single motor variant, because that one offers up to 508 km. Now, in short, what I'm telling you is that this all-electric sports car not only has the speed to command its status as a sports car, it also has the decent range ability to do a little bit of touring should you wish to do so. And now we move into the hot seat of the MG Cyberster, and truthfully folks, the experience from the hot seat is a bit of a mixed bag, but to be fair, I will review it from two angles, one as an EV and secondly as a sports car. However, now However, while the MG Cyberster has supercar power and speeds, it does not have sports car agility. Far from it. If you ask me, truthfully, this car, despite the fact that MG is positioning it as an electric sports car, most sports car purists will have doubts to that claim because of its slightly clumsy drive dynamics. Let me be frank, in the corners, it's not as planted as you expect it to be, and well, truthfully, a, a combustion-powered pure sports car that's half the price and half the weight will leave it for dead in the corners, but not in the straights, because that's really where 725 Nm of torque and 544 PS of power really shines. Yes, this car will beat supercars, but only in the straights. In the corners, it's not the sharpest tool in the shed. If you ask me truthfully, what is the MG Cyberster good at? It is actually good at being a very, very plush, high-tech comfort cruiser more than anything else. If you want to carve corners with this thing, well, let's just say that I would rather carve corners with something else, not this. Okay, as a sports car, well, the MG Cyberster is a bit disappointing. A lot of this stems from the fact that, number one, it is typically an EV in the sense where it is heavy. A lot of its curb bulk and weight comes from that massive battery pack I mentioned earlier. And when you throw this thing in and out of corners, there's no hiding that weight. Because in that situation, you really know that you really feel that this Roadster is not planted at all. Nothing close to its MGA, MGB predecessors from the 60s and 70s. However, at least in the straights, this car will beat supercars lah, thanks to its, well, for this dual motor all-wheel drive version I am testing, it has the 544 PS and 725 Nm output I mentioned earlier. It definitely will beat sports cars in the straights, but sports cars and supercars will leave it for dead in the corners. On that note, I will also agree, a typical combustion-powered sports car that's half the price and half the weight will also leave this car for dead when it comes to corner carving. So if this car is not for corner carving, then what is it for then, Toric? Well, the answer is simple. This is actually a very high-tech, plush, well-equipped comfort cruiser more than anything else, and it has the bonus of added style of an open-top Roadster. So take that however way you will. Some will find it an interesting merit, worth the premium, some may not. Of course, that's not all. In fact, the MG Cyberster actually has quite a number of smaller quirks and issues, but I guess the next set of complaints is best described as first world problems. Let me start with the boot. Yes, despite this car's size, it does come with a usable boot where you can carry luggage in it, but let me highlight that it has a very high loading lip and it is not the most accessible of boots because of that. I guess this MG Cyberster lacks with smaller storage cubbies and bins. It only has a small center console bin plus two smaller storage bins in the doors itself. Yes, there is quite a sizable large shelf-like area behind the seats, but let me just be frank, that's not so ideal because it's not the most accessible of places to keep certain things like your wallet, your phone and whatnot. Apart from that, my biggest complaint with the cabin has to be the accessibility and vision of some of the functions from the touchscreens. And I guess the biggest annoyance for me is actually the vision, especially for the left and right side touchscreens, the ones specifically for the infotainment and the reverse camera view. My biggest problem is that it is obscured and blocked partially by the steering wheel depending on how you sit and view them. And I guess it's a little bit weird for me to put it into reverse and turn my head to the right to find a screen that's quite small for my reverse camera view. But otherwise, like I said, these are mostly first world problems, and well, some first world problems are bigger than the others, and I will highlight the biggest first world problem of all with the MG Cyberster, and it again stems from its powered scissor doors. This is one car that you simply cannot make quiet or low profile arrivals with. Now, despite everything I griped and complained about earlier, I will concede and agree with one argument about the MG Cyberster, and that it is actually a serious bargain. Now, in rear-wheel drive single motor form, it's priced at just under 300,000 ringgit, whereas this dual motor all-wheel drive variant as tested commands slightly under 320,000 ringgit. Sure, for similar amounts of money or slightly more, slightly less, you could actually get some proper combustion powered sports cars, but none of them deliver supercar-like power and speed as what this dual motor version of the Cyberster does, and none of them can deliver the level of tech, novelties, plus dramatic theatrics that the Cyberster already has, and it delivers all of which without breaking a sweat too. Now, on top of all that, let me also highlight that MG Motor Malaysia will offer all of that with some very reassuring after-sales and warranty packages. It includes a 7-year or 150,000 km base vehicle warranty, followed by an 8-year or 180,000 km EV battery warranty, plus an 8-year or 160,000 km drive motor and motor control unit warranty. Now, I don't know about you folks, but given everything that the MG Cyberster offers for that price, yeah, it does sound like a real bargain, but it's all down to you. What do you think, folks? Is the Cyberster worth the premium? Is it really a bargain? Would you bite and go for this somewhat modernized electrified homage to MG's sporting heritage? Well, let me know in the comments below. As always, don't forget to like, share, subscribe.